So here's our first case, and it has to do with a company, Fidelis Furnishing Fabrics, Triple F. Okay, so they are the principal here, and they're a company. And they have an officer or a special kind of employee under the Corporations Act, a company secretary. So let's call this the company secretary. The company secretary is the agent. Now, what does this agent actually go and do? Well, the agent goes and hires cars. And they hire cars from Panorama developments. Now, what comes about is that actually a lot of the cars, or many of these cars, so the cars went to be used by the company. However, there were some cars that the company secretary used on their own, not for the benefit. And what happened was the company is now trying to say, well, we didn't give authority for this, for this personal use of cars, so we shouldn't pay for it. You should sue that person. Panorama Developments is actually saying, well, how could we tell the difference? How could we tell the difference between the cars that were going up here for your use and the cars over here that weren't kind of going for your use? And so the court has to decide what would be, the normal thing to expect of a company secretary. And what do they decide? They said that by appointing the company secretary, by appointing this person, Fidelis Furnishings are holding them out as having the authority to do things that company secretaries would. And company secretaries often would make contracts on behalf of the company about day-to-day business, like hiring cars. And so therefore, from Panorama Development's perspective, they would expect a company secretary to have that authority. And unless Fidelis Furnishing Fabric says different, you can expect that person has the authority to do it. And so in this case, what we actually have was apparent authority. Now notice we have our two elements, okay? The two elements that we need are, number one, is the authority looks reasonable. And number two, PD believes. So it's the third party who believes the company secretary has the authority, and it's based on, it's really important, based on FFF's, or Fidelis Furnishing Fabrics' action. And their action was that they appointed someone, their appointment of that person with that level of authority. Okay, let's have another case. So in this case, we're dealing with a jewelry store, and we have our principal, who's the owner of a jewelry store, and they appoint an agent who is the manager. And the agent has the authority to actually buy some, nice necklaces and earrings. It's not a very good necklace, is it? And earrings, etc., for the jewelry store from some suppliers. So that's the nature of the relationship, and that seems quite reasonable. Okay, if you're a manager, you'd be able to order the jewelry. Now, what actually happens here? What causes the problem? Well, what causes the problem is that the principal, or the owner, sacks the manager. And then the manager later goes and orders some jewelry after they've been sacked, and takes the jewelry away in their little knapsack and has the jewelry for themselves, so keeps the jewelry. Now remember, the issue isn't whether the supplier can get it back, can get the jewelry or money back from the agent, from this manager who did the wrong thing. Of course they can do that. The problem is that the manager's probably spent the money, went down the pub, had a great time, so the supplier can't get anything back from the manager. Now the supplier says, well, who else can I get this money from? And that's where the aha comes and says, actually, can I get it back off the owner, right? So the court has to decide in this relationship, what's gone on here? Does this contract where the agent didn't really have authority because they've been sacked, so of course they didn't have authority to buy the jewellery, but is that contract actually binding on the owner? And the answer is yes. Okay. Yes. Why? Because of apparent authority. You see, the principal had not told the supplier that the agent has been sacked. So if you look at the line here again, from the supplier's perspective, they don't know about this sacking. Right? The supplier has no way of knowing about this sacking. And they've been dealing with this manager and getting the supplies ordered, so from their perspective, everything's normal. So because of that, what we see is that there is this apparent authority because it was reasonable, right, for the supplier to think the manager had the authority. We can also see that the supplier did think. So the supplier actually did think, and the owner had in the past been holding the person out, or they had said yes, they do have authority. They've had that activity in the past. So one of the big lessons from this is if you ever sack an agent, tell the people who deal with that agent. Otherwise, this situation can arise because there's no way that the supplier doesn't know that they've had the sack. So you can see again, it's about what does the third party think, and is what they're thinking based upon something the agent did, based upon something the principal did. And here, yes, we can see it's both of those things. The supplier had no reason to doubt that this person had the authority, and they've had a long history of the principal paying and upholding these contracts. So it's quite reasonable to think that the manager had the apparent authority. Now, just in case you're a little bit worried, right, the principal can also try and sue the manager to get their money back. We'll come to that later. So it's really just saying what happens if there's no money with the manager here. And in this case, it's the principal's fault, right? They hired the wrong person and then they didn't tell this person. It's not the supplier's fault. They're just dealing in ordinary business, and they can't be expected every day to try and figure out, oh, can this person order or not? Has something changed? It's up to the principal to tell the supplier. Okay, one third case, because it is such a critical area. Okay, this case is a little bit more difficult, but hopefully it gives you a sense of what's going on around apparent authority. So to get a bit of an understanding of it, we've got to imagine that what we've got is a hotel, okay? And who owns the hotel? The hotel is actually owned by Laws. And there's a sign over the front door, right, that says Laws Hotel. Okay. So this is really important to the case. And so what we have is Laws owns the hotel, and we have Tooth, and Tooth would be supplying barrels of Forex or the like, some liquor, to the hotel, and Laws would be paying the money. And so this has been going on for quite some time. Then what does Laws do? Laws sells the hotel, so now the hotel is sold to a person by the name of Kinsella. Okay. And Tooth really, if you think about it, Tooth really should be now having their money come from Kinsella. So what actually happens though is that Laws, and this is really important, doesn't tell Tooth about the sale. So let's look at it from Tooth's perspective. You've had several years of selling liquor, getting money from Laws. There's a sign that says Laws Hotel. No one changes the sign. No one tells you that the hotel has actually been sold. And then Kinsella, right? Then Kinsella, the problem becomes Kinsella doesn't pay the money. So now it becomes, who has the contract? Who can Tooth actually sue? Can't get the money from Kinsella. So what can he actually do? Can he actually get the money from Laws? Now Laws says, you know, I'm not Doan. I got nothing to do with this. This is your issue with Kinsella. But the courts say, actually, based upon the representation of the sign, based upon you not telling them, based upon this history of payment. So look at those factors: the sign, the payment, the silence on the sale, right? For those reasons, you were actually holding Kinsella out as an agent, as your agent. So despite having sold the hotel and having no relationship, the court says Tooth was an innocent supplier of third party who had no idea of this relationship change that had occurred. And because you didn't take the necessary actions to make it clear to Tooth, we're going to say that you are actually bound. So Laws is bound, and there is apparent authority. Okay, hopefully those examples have made apparent authority a little bit clearer.